Lights has reliable light.
If it cuts me off.
In front of the camera.
He's got it.
This isn't gonna work.
I'd like to call this meeting to order.
Reliable light.
This is a public meeting as required by subsection 34, bracket 12 of the Planning Act to afford any person an opportunity to make representation with respect to a proposed zoning bylaw amendment respecting 46231 North Street. The purpose of the amendment is to permit an additional residential dwelling unit. Specifically, the owners are looking to convert an existing 7.92 meter by 10.97 meter barn structure into an additional residential unit. Does any member of council have a disclosure of interest concerning this proposal? Seeing none, what method of notice and when was notice given to the public for this meeting?
Madam Chair, as per requirements of the Planning Act, notice was mailed by regular post to every owner of land within 60 meters of the subject land and applicable agencies on Friday, June the 30th, 2021. Notice was specifically posted to the property by municipal staff as well as the municipal website and advertised in the weekly CE Buzz.
Thank you. And Mr. McComb, welcome. We haven't had a presentation from you for a while, so welcome back. And Mr. McComb, our planner, will be presenting this bylaw amendment.
Thank you, Madam Mayor. Share my screen here. Okay, the slide in front of you shows the subject lands located on the south side of North Street in the community of Sparta. Go to the next slide. This is a larger shot showing the general area around the subject lands, largely residential, small residential enclave within the former hamlet. And so we prepared a draft amendment to the Township of Yarmouth bylaw with respect to the proposal. So the first part of the amendment states that Township of Yarmouth zoning bylaw 1998 is further amended by adding section 3, a schedule A to the bylaw, which schedule is attached to and forms part of the bylaw, and this schedule will be known as map part 36 AG. Part 2 of the amendment further amends bylaw 1998 by adding section 3, which includes the zoning maps and schedules, schedule B to the amendment, which schedule is attached here to and forms part of the bylaw and shall be known as Schedule 73 to bylaw number 1998 as amended. Part 3 of the amendment states that the Township of Yarmouth zoning bylaw 1998 is further amended by designating the lands outlined in heavy solid lines in Schedule A here too as OS1-217. Also that the provisions of subsection 8.2.1, which is the standard provisions of the OS1 zone, shall apply subject to the special provisions identified in section 3. So here is that draft map part 36 AG showing the subject lands within the inset on the heavy solid line with the OS1-217 designation being applied. And here is the draft of Schedule B, which is Schedule 73 to bylaw 1998. And of note is the 2 hatched areas that are labeled as septic system and contingency areas. And I'll talk a little bit more about that in just a minute as we go through the regulations. So part 4 of the amendment introduces a new subsection 822.217 to the bylaw. The defined area being the OS1-217 as was shown on zoning map part 36 AG. The additional permitted use is an additional residential unit. And the additional permitted buildings and structures is an approximately 88 square meter detached building or structure for the additional permitted use. And with respect to that hatched area that was shown in Schedule 73, we have a special provision that states that notwithstanding any other provision of the bylaw, No buildings or structures other than a sewage disposal system approved by the designated regulatory authority shall be permitted within the area designated septic system and contingency area, as was shown in that Schedule 73. And finally, Part 5 states that in anticipation of the eventual consolidation of the bylaw and all amendments to such bylaw, including this amendment, we have Schedule C to the bylaw, which is zoning map 36 to bylaw 1998 that shows all changes or amendments to that map part to date, including this particular amendment. And so here we have that particular schedule and the subject lands being shown right in this location right here. And that is the draft, Madam Mayor, if there's any questions.
Thank you very much, Mr. McComb. Have you received any written submissions on this proposal, Diane?
Madam Chair, no correspondence has been received.
Okay, we will now open the meeting to questions from the public for those attending who've not already submitted their concerns or comments to the municipality. If you're listening on your computer, tablet, or smartphone, please click the raise hand icon. And if you've called into the meeting using a telephone, please dial *9. The questions will be taken as sequential order. When given the opportunity to speak, please provide your name and address for the record. Do we have anyone in the waiting room, Mr. Perrin?
Madam Mayor, there are people in the waiting room, no raised hands.
No raised hands. This is last call then, press raise hand or *9. Do any members of council have any questions? Deputy Mayor Marks.
Small question, like the well is shared, Mr. McComb?
I don't have the answer to that, Madam Mayor, through you. I don't have the answer to that, but a previous conversation I had with Mr. McClure, I believe it is, yes.
That to me makes sense if as long as it's adequate. The septic tank, that's not shared or is, just for clarification?
I don't believe the septic system would be shared. I think they have to have their own septic system for the unit, but again, I can get clarification on that for you.
Just a comment if I could, for people in the rural areas with large lots and our lack of housing, I can see where this would be desirable for a lot of people. I have no problem with this at all.
No, we recently passed a new bylaw to allow this anyway. Yes. Any other questions or comments from the rest of council? If not, everyone has been given a fair opportunity to be heard. If there are no further questions, please be advised that any person wishing further information on the actions of council regarding the passing of a bylaw on the proposed amendment should email Diane Wilson at dwilson@centralelgin.org, indicating which public meeting they wish to be notified on and providing their name and address. Those who do not have access to a computer and wish to be notified should call Diane Wilson at 519-631-4860, extension 286, and provide the same information. This public meeting is now concluded. Any amendment to the bylaw will be considered at a future meeting of council. The next meeting is at 1 o'clock in 5 minutes. I don't know if they're interested in this one, probably.
They are. That's the one that we've been receiving correspondence.
Yes.
Either that or they're here for the rain. Live.
Yeah,
I like that.
double monitor down here
Okay.
because that one will be.
I'd like to call this meeting to order. This is a public meeting as required by subsection 34, bracket 12 of the Planning Act to afford any person an opportunity to make representation with respect to a proposed zoning bylaw amendment respecting 416 West Edith Cavell Boulevard. The amendment is required to allow for the construction of a new single detached residential dwelling. Specifically, the applicant is requesting reduction in side yard setbacks and revisions related to the height provisions. Does any member of council have a disclosure of interest concerning this proposal? Seeing none, what method of notice and when was notice given to the public for this meeting?
Madam Chair, as per requirements of the Planning Act, notice was mailed by regular post to every owner of land within 60 meters of the subject land and applicable agencies on Friday, June the 30th. Notice was physically posted to the property by municipal staff as well as the municipal website, and it was advertised in the weekly CE Buzz.
And one question I would ask is, I believe it's 416 Edith Cavell Boulevard, not West Edith Cavell, even though it says West Edith on my sheet here. Because in one part of the report, it says West Edith and the other one, it says Edith Cavell.
My apologies. At the top, it says Edith Cavell.
Yes, just in the part that you had.
apologize.
So I apologize to anyone listening in. It is 416 Edith Cavell Boulevard. I'm going to call on Mr. McComb, our planner, now to present the proposed zoning bylaw amendment.
Thank you, Madam Mayor. Okay, on this slide, we have a location plan showing the subject lands on the south side of Edith Cavell Boulevard, just to the east of the turning circle. And this larger plan shows again the subject lands noted in the heavy red line, noting that the development in the surrounding area is largely residential, low density residential homes. This slide here shows a site plan of the proposed development. So it's a detached two-story garage with a single detached dwelling with a height of 3 stories. And there is a gangway of sorts that connects the detached garage to the house itself. This is a perspective view of the proposed development. Again, showing the proposed 2-story garage, the 3-story house, and the gangway. And so a draft amendment has been prepared with respect to the requested changes. I'll go through the regulations. So part 1 of the amendment further amends bylaw 1507, this Village of Port Stanley bylaw. And amends section by adding to section 3, which includes the zoning maps and schedules, schedule A to the amendment, which will form part of the bylaw and be known as map part 2 bracket BF. Part 2 of the amendment states that the Village of Port Stanley zoning bylaw is further amended by designating the lands that are outlined in heavy solid lines on Schedule A as R1-88, the provisions of subsection 9.2.1 of the bylaw, which for the standard provisions of the R1 zone shall apply, subject to the special provisions noted in section 3 of this bylaw. So here we have that draft map part 20 or 2 bracket BF. And within the inset, you can see the subject lands being denoted with the R1-88 zoning designation. Part 3 of the amendment contains a new paragraph to the bylaw. It's number 92289. Defined area is the R1-89 as shown on the zoning map part 2 BF. They requested a side yard of 1.2 meters and a height under 92289.3 of 11 meters maximum for the main building. Notwithstanding the subsection 2.26, the building height should be measured to the highest point of the dwelling. It's judging by the perspective views there, it's a flat roof proposed for this building, so that'll be to the top of that flat roof area. Part B states that the accessory buildings and structures shall have a height of 6.5 meters maximum. There are a number of exceptions to the standard provisions of the R1 zone, as noted in subsection 92289.4. And finally, part 4 states that in anticipation of the eventual consolidation of the bylaw, all amendments to such bylaw, including this amendment, Schedule B to the bylaw is hereby adopted, being zoning map 2 amended to include the changes made in such zoning map by all amendments to bylaw 1507 to date, including this amendment. And you'll see in front of you, we have this proposed schedule with the subject lines being noted in the southeasterly quadrant of the map. And that is the draft, Madam Mayor, if there's any questions.
Thank you, Mr. McComb. Mrs. Wilson, have you received any written submissions on this proposal?
Madam Chair, correspondence has been received from Doug McFadgen, 420 Edith Cavell Boulevard, voicing concerns with proposal to build a 6,500 square foot structure on a 33-foot lot. He raises issues with the flat roof of the new building being higher than the peaked roof, which abuts the property on the east side. He further inquires if a wind study and a shade study have been done. Correspondence has also been signed by several neighbors stating they believe that the building proposed at 416 Edith Cavell Boulevard has too many square feet to be built on a 33-foot lot. They also believe the design and the height of the building does not suit the streetscape and is not compatible with the other residences. Both items of correspondence have been circulated to council and staff.
Thank you. We'll now open the meeting to questions from the public. For those attending who have not already submitted their concerns or comments to the municipality. If you're listening on your computer, tablet, or smartphone, please click the raise hand icon. And if you are called the meeting using a telephone, please dial *9. The questions will be taken in a sequential order. When given the opportunity to speak, please provide your name and address for the record. I'm now opening the meeting to the public, and Mr. Perrin will let me know, and he'll let you in the order you raise your hands. So Matt Campbell, I see your hand was raised. You are on the screen. Go ahead.
Good afternoon, Madam Mayor. Can you hear me correctly?
Yes, we can.
Wonderful. Thank you so much. So good afternoon, Madam Mayor, members of council. My name is Matt Campbell with the planning firm Zelenka Priamo. We're working on behalf of the applicant for this particular site. There are just a couple of items I would like to expand on with Mr. McComb's presentation. As council may be aware, the zoning bylaw that applies in this area doesn't actually allow for the reconstruction of a single detached dwelling, even though a single detached dwelling was there previously. And in many cases, we've seen this, excuse me, throughout Port Stanley, the zone doesn't actually permit that reconstruction. So regardless of the special provisions that we're asking for, the site would have to be rezoned anyways to allow for a single detached dwelling to be constructed. Now, Mr. McComb is correct. We're asking for a height of 11 meters, and correct, that is going to be a flat roof structure, and you've seen the conceptual drawings that have been prepared. The one thing just to note is that the two buildings on either side of the subject lands, one contains a 2.5-story building, the other contains a 2-story building, both with peaked roofs, which would be similar in scale and massing as is being proposed. We did have a shoreline hazard assessment that was done by a firm called Shoreplan. And during the time that that study was being completed, actually shortly after that study was completed, KCCA brought to our attention that the shoreline study for the broader Port Stanley area was completed. And so when the application was submitted, we were requesting a maximum height of 10 meters. But upon incorporating the recommendations of the report that KCCA had commissioned, we found that the structure actually had to be raised up a little bit to be out of the flood hazard area. So that's why you see the 11-meter figure in front of you today. I think the request is fairly straightforward. If there's any questions from council or the public, I'd be happy to answer those. And thank you very much.
Thank you, Mr. Campbell. Mr. Perrin will let the next person in. Okay, I see someone who has phoned in. So if you could do *9 and unmute, okay, and unmute yourself. Thank you. Would you state your name and address, please, for us?
Yeah, it's Candy Hayward. It's 417 Edith Cavell Boulevard.
Go ahead, Candy.
Okay, my question, I just wanted to ask, when the gentleman mentioned that the building is fairly in keeping with the two side properties, how much taller is it?
Campbell, can you answer that?
Through you, Madam Mayor, to Candy. Candy, I don't have the specific height measurements for those two buildings, but the top of the roofs would be similar. The proposed building would be slightly higher, I believe, than what it would look like, but it's really difficult to tell because the two buildings that are there right now, they have a peaked roof, and those roofs may actually be higher than what we're proposing here. I may ask if planning staff would be able to provide additional information on what zoning applies to those other dwellings that may inform this discussion.
Okay, well, that's kind of a bit of a point. I just wondered how much higher, but of course, yours will have a solid mass rather than a peaked mass, which allows a little more of the light. But the questions I really wanted to ask is, I mean, when we're looking at granting variances, you're kind of saying why not, and I'm kind of saying why. As a council, I think maybe the job is to look at what's best. Obviously, the property owner has their interests in mind, but the council should be looking at the neighborhood. So my biggest issue with this is the reduction in side yards. And to be honest, when I look at this, so you've got a 33-foot wide property. Most of this, short of 2 meters, will be garage, which we can assume they're going to pave their driveway. And if I understand, they're also probably going to have a side entrance, so I assume that will be paved as well. So that will leave less than, if I'm correcting right, other than the beach, that will leave less than 2 or 3% of unpermeable surface on the whole lot. So especially in that area, we have a huge problem with water lately. So I'm thinking they're not going to be containing their groundwater. I don't think it'll probably be draining down the driveway and compounding the effects in the park. But I also think to mitigate these future risks, this is a very sensitive area where we should be looking at trees and ways to deal with the water. So I really think this is a bad place to allow these minimal side yards. I also think the fact that even for their own enjoyment, I mean, we've seen time again that the people have allowed basically a sidewalk width. So even if these people have beach toys or things, everybody's going to have a dune buggy, everybody's going to have maybe a boat or a kayak. And I thought, so how do you get it from the front to the back? But that is my one of the points. But the other one is I'm looking at it and I'm thinking, if you have a backyard that isn't a problem, having a reduced side yard is all right. But when you have it in an environmentally sensitive place and somewhere that poses a hazard, I'm thinking it's exceptionally important to keep them. Like, for example, if your backyard is a forest, you want to have emergency vehicles have some access to that. And in this case, when it's a beach, we are getting dangerously close to building a wall along the entire beach. So for emergency rescue and points, you know, you've got Pump House Beach or the main beach. It's a long way to access in between. So I think allowing enough space to get a stretcher through or an emergency vehicle somewhere along there would be a really good idea. So I just think that this isn't offering anything to the neighborhood. It's adding to the water problems. It's blocking the wind flow. I just don't see where these variances offer anything to anybody but the homeowner themselves. So I know they can quote that we've done it time and time again, but you know me, I've called a million times and tried to complain about variances being granted because they generally don't provide anybody anything or any enhancement for the neighborhood, only for that particular homeowner. So on those, I would object. And I also really object to the fact that when I look at the presentation drawings, I know they're presentation drawings, but considering you have no space between you, so those trees and that lovely foliage that's shown, I take it the only way they could exist is if they were actually painted on the front of the garage. So I don't think you should be allowed to make your entire front yard a driveway, and I don't think you should be allowed to pave almost the entire property, especially in an environmentally sensitive location. So that's my objections.
Thank you, Candy. Mr. McComb, do you have anything, or Mr. Campbell, that you wish to say to Candy or her concerns?
Madam Mayor, the only thing that I would like to add, it's Matt Campbell here,
Yes.
is that through any sort of building permit, the municipality would be looking at stormwater management issues. I know that's something that's been an issue in Port Stanley. We're mindful of that. But that would be taken care of through the building permit process, as this particular site would not be going through the site plan approval process. There was just one item I did want to also add, is that there was the comment about that the beach is I believe the term was environmentally sensitive area. Well, it is an environmentally, it is a sensitive area. It wouldn't necessarily be environmentally sensitive for planning reasons. We've taken that into account through the shoreline hazard assessment, and that's taken into account through the development of the site. But in terms of the biological aspect of it, say endangered species, things of that nature, that was not identified as something that staff were concerned about on this site.
Mr. McComb, do you have any comments you wish to make?
To Madam Mayor, further to Mr. Campbell's comments, just a couple. First of all, the side yard setback that they're requesting is 1.2 meters. That is the same as the side yards that were approved on the developments on either side of this particular place. That side yard does give plenty of room for access to the back. I mean, in a lot of residential subdivisions, we have 1 meter side yards. And emergency services have never raised an issue about 1 meter being too small for them to get equipment and structures and that sort of thing into the rear yards in case they have to access, say, a pool area or something like that. So it's just never been an issue. And we've also heard comments from Central Elgin's emergency services in the past on these beachfront developments that basically, if they need to get to this beachfront area, they're going to get to it one way or the other. They either come down the beach, or go between the houses, or whatever they need to do, but they will get to the response. And finally, for every house that's built there as part of the building permit process, they need to come up with a lot development plan. And part of that lot development plan will take a look at grades on the lot where water is being directed and how that surface water is being managed.
Thank you, Mr. McComb. Are there other, Mr. Perrin?
Through you, Madam Mayor, just to build on what Mr. McComb had stated, as of late, the municipality has required on-site infiltration controls in these areas where there's limited storm outlets. So we are aware of the concern about off-site drainage and ponding along East Boulevard. So there will be a requirement at the building permit stage to provide engineering plans to confirm that increased runoff will be infiltrated into the ground, into the beach area. So through on-site control.
Thank you, because there is permeable pavement too, which would certainly help in that case. I know it's expensive, but are there other participants that have their hands raised?
Yes.
Go ahead and put the next one on. Okay, Judith, would you go ahead?
Hi, it's Judith Hall and Jason Spurgeon from 422 Edith Cavell Boulevard. We do echo the comments and thank you for explaining with respect to the flooding, because it has been a significant issue, particularly over the last 18 months. But also our biggest concern is about the height. 11 meters is 36.8 feet. We just have concerns that it's going to look like a giant apartment building. In another environment, it would be a great building. It looks fantastic, but we're just concerned that we're going to start getting into this apartment building looking construction along here with the extra height, and it will be a bit like a monolith. that's our concern. Jay, do you have anything to add?
No, and maybe just the foundation of the building.
Thank you. Does anyone wish to, that's their concern. I don't know that there's any comment that staff or Mr. Campbell can make concerning that. It's more just the height and the block, the look of the block building. The next person, Mr. Perrin?
There are no other attendees raising their hand.
Okay, no other attendees have raised their hand. If you want to ask, go ahead, please do raise your hand. If not, I'm going to ask right now if any of council have any questions on this proposal. Go ahead, Councillor Fair, then Councillor Kravitz.
Just a question in regards to the surface drainage. Is there any provision that, given it's a flat roof and there's only a couple spots that would drain down, that they can tap or direct it towards the stormwater drainage, or is that not possible?
Mr. Perrin?
Through you, Madam Mayor, to Councillor Fair. Actually, the downspouts will be directed, we would ask that they be directed to an on-site infiltration gallery where the water is infiltrated back into their own property on the beach rather than directed to any storm sewers.
Any Councillor Kravitz?
My question is in regards to the zoning amendment for the height. They're asking for 11 meters. I'm just wondering if anybody can make a comment on what would a building permit not asking for a height, a certain height, what would the minimum height or maximum height be if it was not asked for in a zoning bylaw amendment for this site?
Mr. McComb, what would the minimum height be without this amendment?
Madam Chair, presuming, as Mr. Campbell indicated, we'd have to have the property rezoned just to allow the reconstruction to take place. And the most common zone for these rezonings in this area has been put into an R1 zone. The R1 zone height restriction for the main building is 2 stories. So there's no actual physical measurement of height, it's just 2 stories. And that means if you had each story, you're putting in 12-foot ceilings, and then you're putting in a huge peak roof, you could end up being taller than 11 meters. By setting a specific height in meters, we at least know we have a control over exactly how high this can go. The only other comment I'd have with respect to height is that 11 meters is the height that's been commonly applied to a lot of our new subdivisions. And for a peaked roof, so a gable style roof, that measurement would actually be taken to the midpoint between the peak and the eaves. So the top of the roof would actually be, in some cases, substantially higher than 11 meters. So again, by setting it at this number, we are getting a guarantee that it will be no higher than the 11 meters, which has been used in other zones.
Okay.
Mr. Kravitz, Councillor Kravitz, then Councillor Fair.
I just wanted to follow up to that height question. So what the applicant is asking for is a 3rd story. And there's no mention of a 3rd story in the zoning when the R1 is traditionally 2 stories. Is that that type of ask, is that normal? And not asking for the 3rd story? Mr. McCombs?
Madam Mayor, through you to Councillor Kravitz. We have had approvals for other 3-story buildings along the stretch of Edith Cavell Boulevard, both Edith Cavell Boulevard West very recently, and as well as areas further to the east on Edith Cavell Boulevard. So it's not like this is a unique ask for this area. It has been approved in the past.
Yep.
Thank you. Ms. Councillor Fair, you had another question?
Just given that it's a flat roof and they're concerned about height, is there anything to stop these people from putting a patio up on top of the roof also?
Mr. McComb?
There's nothing in the zoning itself that would prevent them from converting that, but going by the plans that they have right now, they've got a fairly large deck on the main level, as well as a couple other decks on the other 2 levels. So I'm not sure I'd see even the need for something like that. It would require quite a bit of engineering to be able to turn that into usable space as well. So but perhaps if Mr. Campbell is still on the call, he might be able to respond further on that one.
Mr. Campbell?
Madam Mayor, I can advise that I have not had any discussions with either the landowner, nor their home builder, nor the actual designer and architect of this that would indicate any desire for a rooftop amenity space or rooftop patio for this particular site.
Thank you. Mr. Perrin, has anyone else raised their hand? Yes, there is one. Okay, go ahead. Please unmute yourself, the one on the telephone, please.
Okay, it's Candy Hayward again. Another concern I have that I don't think has been addressed is I know we do have a requirement for number of square feet of green space. I know Port Stanley is lacking in a driveway width requirement, but I'm kind of concerned that Edith Cavell Boulevard is probably the only place in the county that is allowing people to turn their entire front yard into a driveway, totally impermeable surfaces. So it allows for no green space or no softening of the building effect by having that green space, but also for the groundwater absorption. I mean, that site currently had a lawn and some large trees that probably did a lot to help, but paving the entire front yard, we're also creating a wall-like effect along the beach, and I'm not sure that's what we really want to do. That's our biggest asset. So creating our biggest, tallest buildings, in essence, creating a wall along the beach is only good for those people, but it impedes the fact that anyone behind them or back from them will not only never see the beach, but they won't even see the horizon, basically, because these are so tall. So it would just seem from a design point that more of a tiered effect with your lower structures being on the beach would be more desirable. We always show Port Stanley, we show the pictures of those big houses down near GT's, but they have a lot of land around them, and you can see the trees and you can see things. But now when the people build their houses with a 1 meter side yard and put their gates and fences between them, you can drive down Edith Cavell and you can't even glimpse the water. You wouldn't know that you're not in a subdivision in London. So I don't think using the examples of what flies in London is a good idea for this unique environment. And also, the only reason we've allowed these minimal side yards for the properties behind us is, again, that we have constantly granted variances and variances on the height. And with the groundwater, I just wondered, when we look at the Prespa development at the corner, where we know that that's an issue with flooding, I've noticed that Prespa's townhouses all have their drains coming from their gutter spouts, and they all drain out onto the sidewalk. So they don't seem to be doing much to contain their own water. So again, I think this is an important site to maintain some green space and less pavement.
Thank you.
So I guess.
Go ahead, finish.
No, that was it.
Okay, Mr. Campbell, do you wish to respond to that at all? Mr. Perrin did respond to the fact about the water and the drainage, and that will be directed back into an infiltration spot on the property itself, on the beach side. Mr. Campbell, about green space.
Madam Mayor, when we look at the zoning bylaw, I believe there is a requirement for what's termed a landscaped open space, which is, in other words, green space, land that cannot be paved or have a building on it. And we're complying with that. I would ask if Mr. McComb might be able to confirm if, in a technical sense, because we have this lot actually goes way back to the beach. In a legal sense, it's quite deep. And in terms of the actual percentage of landscaped open space, I'm just wondering if Mr. McComb can advise us of that in a technical sense, if that would include the beach area to the south, which we're not building on. We're not touching that at all.
Thank you, Mr. McComb.
Thank you, Madam Mayor. as far as the zoning is concerned, this is addressed through the coverage requirements of the bylaw. Mr. Campbell is correct. This is a huge lot. They're allowed to go up to 25% coverage with the house, and I believe 8% coverage with any accessory buildings and structures. I don't believe they're coming anywhere near that based on the size of the lot. So you're going to have a substantial area that's on the beach side or the lake side of this property that will be all open and undeveloped. And a big part of that will never be able to be developed because it's all part of the dynamic beach zone. So yeah, as far as percentage green space, this property is going to have quite a bit of it will be left as essentially green open space.
Thank you. Any further questions from council? Councillor Fair?
My last question, I'm trying to get my head around the natural filtration or filtration on the property. Would that entail burying a tile or something to distribute it, or how would they do that?
Mr. Perrin?
The proponent will have to take and come up with an engineered solution to be able to infiltrate the ground or surface water into the ground. There are a number of different ways of doing that. The method that the municipality has used on our projects and advocated on private property is infiltration galleries, which are engineered plastic structures that are buried within the sand itself, and then water is directed to those structures and then gradually seeps into the ground.
So I assume it's permeable all on.
Correct.
Councillor Rowe.
Madam Mayor, just a question to Mr. McComb further to the percentage of land that's permitted to be built on. So yes, it's on the beach. There has to be a certain percentage of that total that could never be built on. So I'm just curious what the 25 and the 8% would be if you just considered the amount of space, I guess, on the property that can actually be built on and how that relates to some of the neighboring properties.
Mr. McComb?
Madam Mayor, through you to Councillor Rowe. With all of these properties on the beach, we've always used the entire property, whether or not it's part of the dynamic beach area. So we don't do the calculation. It's based on a percentage of the whole lot area, not just a percentage of the area that's you're able to build on. If we were to start to do that, we'd have to actually change the way coverage is defined. So going by the definition of the bylaw, that's how we do the calculation.
Are there any further questions from council? Mr. Perrin?
You have one in the gallery.
One in the gallery, go ahead. Go ahead, Candy.
Hi. My comment was just that, so on the beach side, yes, there won't be any development and possibly some landscaping, but with a 3-story block on the actual side facing the road, so we won't see any greenery whatsoever. So only people walking down the beach might benefit from any green space or landscaping they have. From the street side, we will just be looking at a parking lot again with a garage door. Again, I think there should be some requirement for driveway widths, which is something I've mentioned before, but to allow them to pave the whole thing. So for most people, the way they're going to visualize that is basically a parking lot with some cars and a garage door, with no space for trees or shrubs or any green space basically for people to enjoy. Again, creating that wall type of effect. Edith Cavell is starting to look like a parking lot when you drive down there on a Saturday. All you see is a row of cars. So I think that government should look at, I think they should be looking at, if the beach isn't a developed spot, I think you should look at the actual building lot, not include the beach, which is private property, but a dynamic beach that they can't build on. So I think we need to review that.
Thank you. That's what Mr. McComb said, that we'd have to change the rules that we use for that. Okay, are there any further questions?
Mr. Campbell has his hand.
Mr. Campbell, you go ahead.
Thank you, Madam Mayor. I just wanted to add a little bit to Candy's comment there regarding the driveway width of the frontage. Just to be clear, it's a typical two or a double car garage that's proposed in that area. You can see the measurements that's on the site plan that's included in the staff report. So it's actually the garage isn't beyond anything that you would expect from a typical residential development. It's a double car garage. Now, to the point about landscaping, we do have the 1.2 meter setback on the north side, and that includes the driveway as well. So the driveway is actually spaced 1.2 meters off of the lot line. That would allow some landscaping. On the west side, or on the bottom of the site plan, if you're looking at that, there's actually a larger setback there that could incorporate some additional landscaping. So I just wanted to be clear that it's not that the entire frontage of this property is being paved. It's just a double car garage. Thank you.
Thank you. I believe everyone has been given a fair opportunity to be heard. If there are no further questions, please be advised that any person wishing further information on the actions of council regarding the passing of a bylaw on the proposed amendment should email Diane Wilson at dwilson@centralelgin.org, indicating which public meeting they wish to be notified on and providing their name and address. Those who do not have access to a computer and wish to be notified should call Diane Wilson at 519-631-4860, extension 286, and provide the same information. This public meeting is now concluded. Any amendment to the bylaw will be considered at a future meeting of council.